The rain fell in sheets, a cold, indifferent curtain washing the city's grime into its overflowing gutters. It was a merciless downpour that found every tear in old fabric, every crack in worn-out soles. For Lena, it was just another Tuesday. Her world was a geography of back alleys and overflowing dumpsters, a map drawn in the language of survival. At 21, her hands were already etched with the hard lines of a life spent sifting through the city's refuse. Wrapped in a thin gray wheel shirt that had long ago lost its shape, and a pair of jeans stiff with dirt, she pushed her wire basket through the narrow passage between two brick buildings. The metal wheels screeched in protest against the wet asphalt. She was searching for cans, bottles, anything with a sliver of value that could be traded for a hot meal. Hunger was a dull, constant ache in her stomach, a familiar companion in her solitary existence. A glint of something unnatural caught her eye, nestled beside a mountain of black garbage bags. It wasn't a wet shine of glass or the dull gleam of aluminum. This was different. It was a hard-edged rectangular shape, its dark leather surface absorbing the meager light of the alley. A suitcase. It was pristine, impossibly clean amidst the filth, as if it had been dropped from another world. Curiosity warred with a primal sense of caution. This was not a discarded piece of luggage from a tourist. Its lock was heavy, polished steel, and its corners were reinforced. She nudged it with the toe of her boot. It was heavy, solid, a deep-seated instinct, honed by years of navigating the city's hidden dangers, screamed at her to leave it, to walk away and forget she ever saw it. But desperation was a louder voice. She knelt, her knees sinking into the grimy water, and wrapped her cold fingers around the leather handle. The weight was staggering. It took all her strength to heave it into her basket, where it settled with a muffled thud, displacing the few cans she had managed to collect. She covered it with a piece of soiled cardboard, her heart hammering against her ribs. This was trouble. She knew it with a certainty that chilled her more than the rain. But it was also a secret, a heavy, mysterious promise of something other than the grinding poverty that defined her every waking moment. The city glittered below, a sprawling galaxy of artificial lights that held no warmth. From his penthouse office overlooking La Défense, Lucien Moretti watched the storm lash against the panoramic windows. The glass was an inch thick, soundproof, insulating him from the chaos of the world he commanded. His domain was one of silence, steel, and shadow. The air was chilled to a precise 20 degrees Celsius. The scent of nothingness meticulously maintained by a state-of-the-art filtration system. Lucien stood motionless, his silhouette a sharp, tailored line against the city's electric glow. He wore a dark, bespoke suit that cost more than most people earned in a year, its fabric uncreased, its perfection a reflection of the man himself. He was le patron of the Moretti Syndicate, a powerful Corsican milieu boss whose influence stretched from the ports of Marseille to the highest echelons of corporate finance. His power was not in Dax, loud threats, but in the terrifying stillness that preceded his decisions. His loyal second-in-command, Pascal, stood a respectful 3 meters away, his head bowed. The transfer was intercepted, Pascal said, his voice low and steady, betraying no emotion. The vehicle was found abandoned. The driver is missing, and the case is gone. Lucien did not turn. He continued to gaze at the city, his reflection a pale, impassive mask in the glass. The suitcase contained 5 million euros in untraceable notes, the final payment for a deal that would solidify his control over the city's shipping lanes. Its loss was not just a financial blow. It was a sign of weakness, an invitation for his rivals to challenge his authority. Antoine, Lucien said, his voice a low vibration that seemed to make the cold air even colder. It was not a question. We believe so, Pascal confirmed. His men were seen in the area. They're clumsy. This was not a clean operation. It suggests they lost it too. Lucien's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Clumsy or not, the money was gone. The foundation of his empire was built on fear, and an unwavering reputation for control. This incident, this single missing suitcase, was a crack in that foundation. He turned slowly from the window, his dark eyes fixing on Pascal. They were eyes that had witnessed unspeakable things and ordered more. Yet they held no flicker of rage, only an arctic calm that was far more menacing. "Find it," he commanded. "Find the case, find the driver, and bring me the head of whoever has it now. I do not care who they are or why they have it. It is mine. It will be returned." Pascal bowed deeper. "Oui, patron." He knew the order was absolute. In their world, there was no room for failure, no space for excuses. There was only the will of the Corsican boss, and the bloody consequences for those who defied it. Lena's apartment was a single room, a cramped box with a stained mattress on the floor, a hot plate, and a window that looked out onto a brick wall. The air was thick with a smell of damp and decay. It was here, in this small, bleak space, that the suitcase seemed to grow in size, dominating the room with its silent, imposing presence. She had managed to drag it up the 4 flights of stairs, her muscles screaming in protest. Now it sat in the center of the floor, a dark monolith of temptation. Her hands trembled as she ran them over the smooth leather. The lock was a complex mechanism, a small circular dial with a stylized Moor's head etched into its center. She had no tools, no way to force it open. Part of her was relieved. As long as it remained closed, she could pretend it was just a box. But the weight of it, the sheer possibility locked inside, was a suffocating pressure. Her mind, fueled by hunger and exhaustion, began to race. What if it was full of money? Enough to escape this life. Enough for a real apartment, for food that didn't come from a dumpster, for clothes that weren't threadbare. The thought was a dizzying, dangerous fantasy. She could disappear, take a train to another city, start over, become someone else. No one would ever. I know. Who would miss a scrap collector? She was invisible, a ghost haunting the city's forgotten corners. But another voice, quieter and more persistent, whispered in her conscience. It was the voice of her grandmother, who had raised her with stories of integrity and honor, telling her that a person's worth was not in their pockets, but in their character. You take what isn't yours. You take a piece of your own soul with it, she used to say. The suitcase felt wrong. It felt heavy, not just with its contents, but with the energy of the world it came from. A world of violence and secrets. She turned on her small, crackling television, hoping for a distraction. A local news report flashed across the screen. A police spokesperson was giving a statement about an incident in the downtown core, near the very alley where she had been. An abandoned vehicle. Signs of a struggle. Authorities were investigating possible links to organized crime. The reporter's words hit her, like a punch to the gut. Organized crime. The cold dread she'd felt in the alley returned tenfold. This wasn't just lost property. This was a piece of a violent, deadly puzzle, and she was holding it. The fantasy of a new life evaporated, replaced by a stark, terrifying reality. Keeping the suitcase wasn't an escape. It was a death sentence. The decision settled in her heart with the cold finality of a tombstone. She could not keep it. Every moment it remained in her room, it was a beacon drawing a world of unimaginable danger closer to her. The people looking for this suitcase would not be kind. They would not be forgiving. They would tear her life apart, and no one would even notice she was gone. The Moor's head on the lock seemed to mock her. A stark, historic symbol of a world she had no right to touch. It was a clan's crest, a mark of ownership. She had to get rid of it. But how? Throwing it in the Seine felt wrong. It would just be found by someone else, perpetuating the cycle. Leaving it in another alley felt like an act of cowardice. The news report had mentioned the police. It was the only answer that felt clean. The only path that didn't involve her, becoming a part of the darkness that clung to the object. The thought of walking into a police station filled her with a profound fear. People like her. The police were not a source of comfort or protection. They were figures of authority who moved the homeless along, who looked at her with suspicion, who saw her not as a person but as a problem to be managed. They would question her, accuse her. How did a girl in rags come to possess a suitcase that was clearly worth a fortune? They would think she stole it. They might arrest her. She could lose the little she had, her freedom, her anonymity. She sat on the edge of her mattress, staring at the case, her grandmother's words echoing in her mind. Doing the right thing is almost never the easy thing, child. Lena took a deep, shuddering breath. She was terrified, but the fear of what might happen if she kept the suitcase was greater than the fear of what might happen if she turned it in. She had nothing in this world but her own integrity. It was a meager inheritance, but it was the only one she had, and she would not trade it, not for anything. She stood up, her body aching with exhaustion and hunger, and wrapped her hands around the cold leather handle one last time. She would walk to the precinct. She would put the suitcase on the counter, tell them where she found it, and then she would walk away. It was a simple, terrifying plan. She pulled her thin coat tighter around her shoulders, opened the door to her small room, and began the arduous task of dragging the heavy case back down the stairs and into the unforgiving city streets. Each step a testament to a choice made against every instinct for self-preservation. The police station was an assault on the senses. The air was thick with a smell of stale coffee, disinfectant, and a low-level hum of human misery. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a harsh, sterile glare on the scuffed linoleum, floors, and pale green walls. Lena felt every eye on her as she struggled through the door, the suitcase bumping awkwardly against her legs. She was a smudge of gray and grime in a world of crisp blue uniforms and official paperwork. The officer at the front desk, a burly man with a tired, cynical face, looked up from his computer and frowned, his gaze sweeping over her tattered clothes and the expensive-looking case. "Can I help you?" he asked, his tone dripping with suspicion. Lena's voice was barely a whisper. I found this." She gestured with her chin towards the suitcase. "I want to turn it in." The officer's frown deepened. "Found it where?" "In an alley. Downtown." He sighed, clearly unimpressed. "Right. And you just decided to bring it in. Fill this out." He slid a form and a cheap pen across the counter, his expression making it clear he believed she was either a thief or mentally unstable. As Lena fumbled with the pen, her cold, numbed fingers struggling to grip it, the glass doors of the station slid open with a quiet whoosh. A sudden chill swept through the room, a palpable drop in temperature that had nothing to do with the weather. Every officer in the lobby seemed to straighten up, their chatter ceasing. Lucian Moretti entered, flanked by Pascal and two other men in identical dark suits. They moved with a silent, synchronized grace that spoke of immense power and discipline. Lucian's presence was magnetic and terrifying. He didn't walk, he flowed, a river of dark energy that commanded the space around him. The station, a bastion of civic authority, suddenly felt like his personal territory. The desk sergeant's jaw went slack. He recognized the man instantly. Everyone in Paris with a connection to the law knew who Lucien Moretti was. Lucian's cold, dark eyes scanned the room, missing nothing. They passed over the nervous officers, the drab decor, and then they landed on Lena, on the suitcase, at her feet. He saw the Moor's Head emblem on the lock, a flicker of something surprise, perhaps even a sliver of respect, passed through his impassive gaze before it was extinguished. He had come here to control the narrative, to file a report for a lost business asset, to keep the police from digging too deep. He never expected the problem to walk right through the front door and solve itself. Lucian moved toward the counter, his polished leather shoes making no sound on the floor. The air crackled with tension. The police officers stood frozen, uncertain of their role in this silent drama. They were law enforcement, but the man before them represented a different, more ancient form of law. Lucian stopped directly in front of Lena. She was so small, so fragile-looking, yet she hadn't flinched from his gaze. She simply stood there, trembling slightly, clutching the pen. He was so close, she could feel the cold radiating from him, see the impossibly fine weave of his suit. He looked down at the suitcase. Then, his eyes lifted to meet hers. They were deep and dark, like polished stones at the bottom of a frozen lake. "This belongs to me," he said. His voice was not loud, but it carried an absolute authority that cut through the low hum of the station. He didn't address the police. He spoke only to her. The desk sergeant cleared his throat nervously. "Sir, we have procedures." Lucian silenced him with a single, glacial glance. He turned his attention back to Lena. "Why did you bring it here?" he asked, his voice a quiet intensity. "Why? Not open it?" It was the ultimate test. In his world, no one returned something of value without a motive. They wanted a reward, a favor, or they were trying to set a trap. Honesty was a currency he had never encountered. Lena swallowed hard, her throat dry. "It wasn't mine," she said, her voice small, but clear. "I saw the news about the trouble downtown. I knew it was important. I didn't want anyone to get hurt." The simplicity of her answer was disarming. Lucian stared at her, searching for the angle, the lie, the hidden agenda. He found nothing but a raw, unvarnished sincerity in her wide, frightened eyes. It was incomprehensible. This girl, who looked like she hadn't eaten a decent meal in a week, had stumbled upon a fortune that could have changed her life forever. And her first instinct was to return it because it was the right thing to do. It was a concept so alien to his existence that it momentarily stunned him. He gave Pascal a sharp nod. "Check it." Pascal knelt, producing a small, specialized key from his pocket. He inserted it into the Moore's head lock. There was a soft click. He opened the lid just enough to see the neatly stacked bundles of cash inside, then closed it again and stood. He looked at Lucian and gave a single, confirming nod. It was all there, untouched. The powerful Corsican boss felt a flicker of an emotion he couldn't name. It was a strange, unsettling dissonance in the cold, predictable calculus of his life. He was prepared to dismiss her. The problem was solved. The case was recovered. His reputation remained intact. He would have Pascal give her a few thousand, an amount that was an insult to him but a fortune to her, and send her on her way. It was a clean, transactional end to a bizarre encounter. He reached into his coat, ready to signal Pascal, but his eyes fell on her hands, still clutching the cheap plastic pen. They were chapped and raw from the cold. The nails, broken, but they were steady. And on her right wrist, peeking out from the frayed cuff of her gray wool shirt, was a small silvery scar. It was an old mark, faded with time, shaped like a crescent moon. The sight of it was like a key turning a lock deep within the recesses of his memory, opening a door to a room he had kept sealed for 15 years. The world around him seemed to fade, the fluorescent lights of the station dissolving into the flashing red and blue of emergency vehicles on a rain-slicked highway. He was no longer the untouchable patron. He was 25 again, reckless and arrogant, driving too fast on a dark, stormy night. He remembered the sickening screech of tires, the explosive crunch of metal, the world tumbling in a chaotic spin. His car had slammed into another vehicle. He'd stumbled out, miraculously unharmed, his ears ringing. The other car was a wreck, flames beginning to lick at the propane engine. He saw a man and a woman in the front seats, motionless, and in the back, a small child, a little girl, crying amidst the smoke and shattered glass. Panic and self-preservation, the coward's twin instincts, had seized him. He was the heir to the Moretti Syndicate. A DUI, a fatal accident, would have been a scandal that could have destroyed his future. His first thought was to run. But the girl's cries. He couldn't leave her. He had wrenched open the back door, the heat of the fire scorching his face, and pulled her out of the wreckage just as the flames engulfed the car. She had a deep cut on her wrist from a piece of broken glass. He remembered pressing his handkerchief against it to stop the rain, bleeding, the fabric quickly turning crimson. He had placed her on the side of the road, a safe distance away. just as the first sirens grew louder in the distance. He looked at her one last time, a small, terrified child with a crescent-shaped wound on her wrist, and then he had vanished into the night, a ghost leaving behind a life he had both saved and shattered. The memory crashed over him with the force of a physical blow, leaving him momentarily breathless. He stared at the scar on Lena's wrist, the past and present colliding in the sterile environment of the police station. It couldn't be. It was an impossible coincidence, a cruel joke played by the cosmos, but the details were too vivid, too precise. The storm, the fire, the scar. He had to No, his voice when he spoke was different. The Arctic edge was gone, replaced by a raw, unsteady huskiness that made Pascal's eyes widen in surprise. Your wrist, Lucian said. His gaze locked on the faint, silvery mark. The scar. How did you get it? Lena looked down at her own hand, surprised by the question. It was a part of her she rarely thought about anymore, a permanent reminder of the day her life had split into a before and an after. A car accident, she answered softly, her voice distant with the memory. When I was little, my parents, they didn't make it. The words hung in the air between them, heavy and devastating. Lucian felt the floor tilt beneath his feet. I was told I shouldn't have survived, Lena continued, her eyes unfocused as she looked back in time. The car was on fire, but someone pulled me out. A stranger, a young man. She looked up, meeting Lucian's intense gaze. I don't remember his face. It was all smoke and flashing lights. But I remember two things. I remember he had these really dark, serious eyes, and he had a tattoo on his wrist. When he held my arm to stop the bleeding, I saw it. She paused, a faint line appearing between her brows as she tried to recall the image. It was a head, a man's head in a bandana, a Moor's head. The world stopped. The buzzing lights, the shuffling feet, the distant city, sounds, it all went silent. A Moor's head, the symbol of his family, the crest he had tattooed on his own wrist at the age of 18, a mark of his birthright and his birthright, burden. The same symbol that was on the suitcase she had just returned to him. He was the stranger. He was the man who had caused the accident that killed her parents. The man who had orphaned her and left her to a life of poverty and struggle. And he was the man who had saved her life in the same damnable moment. The sheer, crushing weight of the irony was suffocating. This woman, this ghost, from his past, had just handed him back his fortune, guided by a moral compass he had long since discarded. She was the living embodiment of his greatest sin, and his one solitary act of grace. Just as this cataclysmic realization settled upon Lucian, the fragile peace of the police station was shattered. Outside, on the rain-swept street, a convoy of black sedans screeched to a halt, blocking the entrance. Men in dark suits emerged, their movements sharp and aggressive. It was Antoine, impatient and arrogant. He'd tracked the case here, and seeing Lucian's men, assumed a confrontation was inevitable. He was making a brazen play for power, right on the steps of the city's law enforcement. Antoine himself stepped out of the lead car, a cruel smirk on his face. He thought he had cornered his rival. Catching him in a moment of vulnerability, Pascal moved instantly to Lucian's side. Patron, it's Antoine. He's challenging. Whoosh. The police officers inside scrambled for their weapons, shouting an alarm, creating chaos. But Lucian barely registered them. His world had narrowed to two things: the profound life, altering truth standing before him, and the immediate, physical threat to her safety. In that instant, something shifted within him. The cold, calculating mind of the Corsican boss was overtaken by a fierce, primal instinct he hadn't felt in years. The need to protect. This was not about money or territory anymore. This was about the woman his past had wronged so grievously. This was his chance, a single, fleeting opportunity handed to him by fate to atone for the cowardice of that night. He could not run this time. He turned to Lena, his expression one of grim resolve. "You are coming with me," he said. It was not a request. Before she could process what was happening, he had placed a firm hand on her back, shielding her with his own body and propelling her toward a rear exit he knew existed in the building's layout. "Pascal," he commanded over his shoulder. "Handle this. No witnesses. No survivors." The order was delivered with the chilling finality of a death sentence as Pascal and the other men turned to face Antoine's crew, drawing weapons from beneath their coats and transforming the station lobby into a battlefield. Lucien guided Lena through a back corridor and out into a deserted alley. His armored sedan was already there, the engine purring. He pushed her into the plush leather interior and slid in beside her, the door closing with a heavy, sealing thud that shut out the sounds of the escalating violence. The car pulled away smoothly, disappearing into the labyrinth of city streets, leaving Antoine and his ambitions to be erased by Pascal's brutal efficiency. The limousine moved through the city like a silent phantom, its soundproofed interior a world away from the chaos they had left behind. Lena sat rigidly on the soft leather, her mind reeling. She was in a car that was more luxurious than any place she had ever lived, beside a man who was both a terrifying figure of power and, impossibly, the ghost from her past. The Corsican boss said nothing, his gaze fixed on the rain-streaked window, but the silence was thick, with unspoken history. They arrived at a sleek glass skyscraper that pierced the clouds. A private elevator took them directly to the penthouse. The doors opened into a vast, minimalist space that felt more like a modern art museum than a home. It was cold, sterile, and beautiful, a perfect reflection of the man who inhabited it. Lucien led her to the floor-to-ceiling windows. The entire city was spread out before them, a breathtaking, impersonal vista of light and shadow. He stood beside her, not looking at the view, but at her reflection in the glass. "That night," he began, his voice low and strained. "I was celebrating a business deal. I was drinking. I was driving too fast. The accident. It was my fault." He finally turned to face her, his composure cracking, revealing the tormented man beneath the stoic facade. "I killed your parents. I destroyed your life before it even began." Lena stared at him, her heart a wild drum against her ribs. The anger and hatred she should have felt were absent, replaced by a profound, hollow shock. "I pulled you from the car because I could not bear to have a child's death on my conscience," he continued, his voice raw with a guilt that had festered for 15 years. "But then I ran. I ran like a coward, because I was afraid of losing my power, my future. I left you there, an orphan with nothing. Every day, since that moment, has been a poison in my soul." He took a step closer, his eyes pleading. "I cannot give you back your parents. I cannot erase the years of hardship you have endured because of me. But I can give you everything else. A home, an education, a future, anything you want. Let me try to fix what I broke." Tears welled in Lena's eyes, not of sorrow, but of a strange, overwhelming sense of cosmic closure. The man who had taken everything from her was now offering her everything. She saw not the fearsome patron, but a man drowning in his own past, reaching for a lifeline. And that lifeline was her. "Why?" she whispered. "Why tell me this?" "Because you," he said, his voice breaking, "showed me what honor is. You, with nothing, returned what was mine without a second thought. You are better than I could ever be. You are the person I should have been in that moment, in that cold, empty palace in the sky. Two broken souls found each other across a chasm of tragedy and time." Lena did not see a monster. She saw a man desperate for redemption. She nodded slowly. An unspoken pact of forgiveness, and a new beginning passing between them. The city lights below seemed to shine a little, brighter, no longer cold and distant, but like a million tiny promises of a shared dawn.